Mr. Chair, our next witness will be witness number 216, and it's on page 382 of your bundle. Hello, Ms. Witness, can you hear me?
بله من صدا
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. The chair has.
Madam Witness, good morning.
Oh, Mr. Chair, can you move your microphone?
Madam Witness,
صبح خیر
good morning.
صبح
Good morning.
Would you repeat after me, please? I solemnly declare that I will speak the
Bale.
truth,
من سوگند
I solemnly declare
speak the truth,
که حقیقت را
to speak the truth,
and nothing but the truth.
ها.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
There'll be questions now from counsel, followed by questions from the panel. Thank you.
Ms. Witness, you have submitted a very detailed statement to the tribunal that covers November 16th, November 17th, and November 18th. And I've also noted that you have indicated that you want to have your identity and everything kept confidential. So I would ask you to not disclose anything that would jeopardize that confidentiality or your security. But with that, if you could please inform the tribunal, starting on November 16th, what you observed, then the 17th, and then the 18th.
بله
On the first day, when the protests started, I left home and I went to one of my relatives. I was on the bus to go to their house. On the way, I faced a heavy traffic. We got stuck in the traffic for 10-15 minutes. The driver said that you can walk. There is no way to move. We didn't know what was going on then. We left the bus. I realized that all drivers had turned off their cars in the middle of the street, and they had left their cars. They were not even chanting any slogans. It was complete silence. As there was no movement, we were asked to leave the bus, and I started walking towards my relative's house. I was there till the evening, till the sunset. I didn't see anything happen because I was at my relative's house. When I was going back, on my way back to home, to my own house, since there was no transport available, I had to walk back home. When I got to the township that I live in, because of security reasons, I cannot mention its name. I just realized that it was chaos within this township. Everyone was on the street. All bank items were outside. People were burning them. They were causing anarchy, vandalism, but I was sure that people were not doing so because despite all what was happening, there was no officer there. If ordinary people were doing so, then security forces would have rushed to the place. But I didn't even see one officer. I filmed the burning of the banks. And I sent the films, and I explained what was going on. Then I walked home to whatever bank I went, I saw that it was being burnt. I knew that it wasn't what ordinary people did. The reason is, if the ordinary people wanted to do so, well, there was nothing important in the banks. The banks had already been vacated. There were just some papers, useless papers in the banks. There were a number of computers there, and people, of course, they were not people. They were just some besiegers maybe, and some thugs. They just crushed all the equipment and burned the items. And from the township is 2 to 3 kilometers across. So from the first to the fifth square of that township, it's just 2 to 3 kilometers. And when I was walking through this route, I saw that every bank was being burnt down. When I reached home, I realized that there was no electricity and there was just smoke and fire. Even my own house was filled with smoke. We could not breathe well. And the same continued till 12. And people were chanting slogans on the streets. And I also joined the people. We were chanting slogans. And there were no offices. The day came to an end the following day. I should also say that the previous day when the banks were being burnt, I went inside from the side of a shop. It was a lot of smoke. It was difficult to breathe. Therefore, I went to one of the alleys, and I saw that 3 of these thugs, and when I called them thugs is because they looked like thugs. You can easily distinguish thugs from ordinary people. They said that now we have burnt the banks. Now it is time to go and burn the municipality. I thought that they wanted to burn the municipality the same night. It was 12 p.m. We were on the street. People were dispersed. We went back home. The following day, from early morning, we could hear the sound of the protesters. Since we were close to the main street, I could hear them. I came out after I heard people chanting slogans, and I went to. I walked a little bit away from our house, and we went to the 5th square, and we were chanting slogans. And when we reached the 5th square, I should say that from the 1st square till we reached the 5th square, we saw no offices. But when we reached the 5th square, I saw the special unit with the water cannons waiting. And I also could hear shots fired. I couldn't see anyone shooting. I could just hear the shots. And when we got to the 5th square, we just realized that the officers were shooting. Probably they were just shooting in the air so that the people would get dispersed. But the people didn't show much fear. And they were just marching ahead towards the 5th square. So then the police started shooting at people, and the people got dispersed. There was a young boy, about 17 or 18 years old, who got shot in the leg. People took the boy and put him in a car and took him away. I didn't realize whether that was an ordinary car or whether it belonged to an officer. We just know that the individual was taken away. We then realized that the water cannons were being used against people. The people were dispersed. Then we went back to the 1st square. We were still chanting slogans until we reached the 1st square. The people gradually scattered. And it was 5 to 6 p.m. It had become dark because it was autumn. And when it became dark, people gathered in larger numbers. Some of our relatives called and asked where I was. I said that I was in the first square, and I was outside. They joined me. They had two adolescent girls. They joined me with the adolescent girls with their parents joined me. And we were at the first square. And the municipality is close to the first square. So we went to the municipality street. I was just hearing people saying that go towards the municipality is to be burnt down. We went towards the municipality. There was a pride vehicle inside the municipality yard, and a cocktail Molotov was being used, was thrown towards the pride, and the pride started burning. The people broke the windows. I'm not sure if the people were really doing so. It was at this time when the officers suddenly appeared. We didn't realize where they came from. They started shooting at people. Some of the shots were pellets, and some of them were military bullets. We retreated, and we fled. Some people hit me, I fell down. People lifted me up. Then we went to an alley. We went inside a house whose owner opened the door and asked us to go in. After the situation became calmer, we left the house. My relatives joined me. As we were chanting slogans, suddenly we saw that our throat and eyes are burning, and we were told that tear gas was thrown. So we covered our face and mouth, and we went towards the first square. As we were going back to the first square, the shooting started. A young boy was hit. I didn't realize how old he was. He had a mask, and it was dark. One of our relatives, whose small daughter was next to me, opened his shawl, and we put it around his leg, and the boy was taken as well. Then we went back to the first square. We realized that everywhere was dark. Close to the first square, there is a tower called Negin Tower. Shooting was taking place from the top of that tower towards us. And there's also a school in the first square. From the roof of that school, I think, shooting was also taking place. There was a connex that me and the wife of and one of my friends went there. We tried, and my friend just said that her arm was burning. Something had hit her. It was dark. We just thought maybe she had hit someplace. She said, no, I think that I've got blood on my sleeves. So we left the place. Gradually, slowly, we left, leaning towards the wall. We were not sure where we were being shot at. We were just guessing that from the top of the tower we were being shot at. So we went home. And then, yes, we realized that, yes, there had been some pellets that had hit her, and her arm had become bloody. Until 12 p.m., 1 a.m., everybody was on the street. And afterwards, the people gradually scattered. It was on the third day of the protests that once again, I forgot to say that there were a number of shops that belonged to the IRGC. It was said that the people were plundering these shops. We went towards those shops, and we were told that none of these people who were plundering the shops were ordinary people. At a time when there were no offices, at the time of burning the banks, at the time of the plundering of the shops, there were no offices either. We were just thinking, how could a shop be easily broken in and all the stuff be stolen without any reaction by the officers? That's the reason that I am sure that the Basijis were plundering the shops and not the people. is that because I heard from one of our relatives who was one of the members of Basij, he confessed himself how much they had plundered, how much items they had taken from the shops. Therefore, I became certain that this was not something that ordinary people had done. Many of these shops were selling electric items. Some of them were selling food stuff. So a lot of stuff was stolen. And that day finished. The following day, we woke up, we went to the streets again, we started protesting, chanting slogans, but there were so many offices in Fardis that I can say for every individual there was one officer standing. When the people saw how the situation was, they got frightened maybe to some extent. So the people were not chanting any further slogans. We were just walking towards the 5th square. And again, shooting started. People dispersed and we came back. The majority of the people who were chanting slogans on the 3rd day were women. You rarely saw a man among the women. So we went back. Wherever we went, we saw the officers shooting in the air. So we had to go to the side alleys so that the officers would leave. Finally, we went back to the 1st square, and nothing further happened on that day because there was too many officers on the street, and we didn't really know what to do. We just heard that there were a large number of people arrested. I should also say that one of my friend's son was close to Khaliqi Pharmacy, and a pregnant woman who left the drugstore along with a 5 to 6-year-old child. The woman was shot by the officers, and then my friend went to save her. The son of my friend was also shot in the arm. She was taken away, and she was kept for a month in detention center. She was given no medicine. She received no medical support and no food, no water. She was kept there for 1 or 2 days without any water, injured. So her arm got infected. They finally had to take her to the clinic, and she was bandaged, and her arm was bandaged. Oh, sorry, the son of my friend's arm was only bandaged, and the bullet was still inside his arm. These are the things that happened during these days. There was another thing that I did not see myself. There was a 7 or 8-year-old boy who was shot dead. Many of our young people died during November 2019. I should also say that there was a woman who also got killed along with her husband. The lady got shot and died. It has been 3 years since the incident, so I cannot fully remember everything. But I have already testified. I may have forgotten some points, and I have explained everything completely in my written statement.
Thank you. I have just 2 clarification questions for you, and then I'm going to have the panel ask you questions, okay? So the first one is, you had said that the bank was vacated, the banks were vacated. Do you mean that they were closed down and they were not operational, or that they were just closed for the day, and so it was not the operating hours of the banks?
نه موقعی که
No, when the banks were attacked, it was outside the working hours of the banks. Vacating the banks, what I meant was that if there was any money in the bank, any valuables in the bank, they had already taken everything away because they knew these accidents would happen. And therefore, it was not ordinary people who did this. It was them, the forces who had done that, because they knew something like this would happen.
And then the other question I have is when you heard people say burn it down or they're going to burn it down, did you think that the statements were made did you believe them that they were actually going to burn it down, or did you believe they were saying it in anger because of the environment that the protests were creating?
Only because of their anger, the protesters were saying those things, but the vandalism was not done by the ordinary people. I'm sure of it 100%.
Mr. Chair?
Good morning, witness, and thank you for being here today. I don't have a lot of questions, but a couple of things are raised by your testimony. One, obviously, is that the situation that you're describing, which lasted for 3 days or so, was very volatile. It was violent. There were armed security forces there. Their faces were covered. They're shooting from roofs. They're shooting from cars. Is that a fair description of the general situation in the streets?
Yes, and perhaps much worse than this, and perhaps I was not able to convey to you the gravity of it. It was much worse than that. It was a horrifying atmosphere because the security forces were there. It's as if we were in a war.
Nonetheless, and I salute the individuals who did this, nonetheless, people went back out every day, didn't they? People went into the streets every day, despite that situation.
Yes, then they were fearless. When we were on the streets and even before the protests started, the youth had broken all the cameras which were installed in front of the shops. So I had my glasses on and I had my mask on too, personally. But those who were surrounding me, I was also recommending to them not to let go of their glasses and their masks and to wear them. But before everything happened, all the CCTV cameras that were attached to the shops were all destroyed by the youth so that nobody could be identified afterwards. And something else that I forgot to tell you, the windows of many of the cars were broken, and it was not done by ordinary people. It was done by the Basij, because you could recognize them by the way they were clad. They were not ordinary people.
I have a question about a sequence of events regarding City Hall. And my understanding from your statement, please let me know if I'm incorrect, is that the protesters attacked City Hall and threw rocks and actually attacked the building. Is that correct? And later on, the building was burned, and I understand that there's an issue as to who actually burned it, and that, in your view, it was security forces. But I'm wondering if you could describe that initial attack on City Hall. Was that the case?
The first attack to the City Hall, of course, so what preceded that was the attack to the banks, and then came the attack to the City Hall. With regard to the banks and the fire to them, I came across a few people and I passed by them who have done it. As I told you, ordinary people could be distinguished from besieged forces very easily. And these 2-3 people whom I heard and said, let's go and set fire to the City Hall, those were the people who, for example, had long beards, they had buttoned up. The way they were clad, you could tell that they are the besieged, the paramilitary forces, not the ordinary people. Ordinary people were throwing only stones towards the City Hall. And somebody threw a cocktail Molotov towards the City Hall, and it hit a car, and the car caught fire and exploded. And that person was not one of the ordinary people either. Ordinary people were just breaking windows, etc. And those who wanted to set fire to this City Hall, I'm sure they were not ordinary people either. During this time, of course, the forces started attacking people, and the people retreated.
I'm also interested in an incident you described where apparently a woman, I believe it was on the 18th of November, a woman was grabbed by a number of security forces, and she began screaming and resisting, and the protesters actually succeeded in freeing her from them. Am I understanding that correctly? The protesters intervened and managed to free this woman. Is that the case?
Yes, yes. Yes. Yes, the people were shouting and saying, let go of her, and attacked the forces. And the forces came to entangle with the youth to catch them, and then the woman was freed.
There was some resistance, and there was some successful resistance.
Yes.
The question has to do with the clinics, and this is a topic that's come up more than once over the last few days of hearings, which is you say that anyone who was taken to the clinics, who had been wounded and had been taken to the clinics, was seized there and arrested, taken away by security forces, and I'm wondering how you know that. Had you seen this occur? How is it that you have that information?
First of all, I have to say that all the clinics or the dispensaries that were in that area, all the security forces were gathering in those places, in the clinics. That's to say that even before the accident that you're talking about, I had seen it. And as we said before, all the trouble started, and even in the year 1388, that was the case that happened. In parentheses, I have to say that we had other problems in 1388, and I had seen the same thing happening even then during the protests in the year 1388. The son of one of our relatives who disappeared for 3 months and from whom we had no news. The same had happened. My own daughter was in detention overnight at that time. And at that time, people had witnessed that the wounded people who had been taken to the clinics had been arrested. And 2 years later, that's to say in the 1398, the same thing happened 2 years ago. We saw that the forces were gathering even outside the clinics. They would not even allow the wounded people to be taken inside. The person who was wounded, whether with a war bullet or with the pellets, they would just throw them into their vehicles and would take them away.
All approximately 2 years ago, correct? I'm just clarifying.
Yes, of course, I went to get some tablets clinic. I wanted the tablets for our friend who had been hit with pellets. I could see myself that there were a number of plainclothes forces, and there were also members of the police force, and I could hear from what they were saying to each other. I could tell that they were waiting for the wounded people to be brought there in order to take them away. And they had also instructed the doctors that they had no right to admit any wounded people. And of course, the doctors were fearful, and they would not admit them, they would not accept them.
Has that been the practice since these events that occurred 2 years ago? Has that been the practice anyway, or was that unusual that the security officers would be located at clinics as they were then? I understand that you haven't been riots for 2 years, but if someone has been wounded in some respect, are security officers stationed at clinics as a general matter?
نه
No. Only if it is related or associated with the protests, the forces would go to these clinics even beforehand. Well, there could be other incidents. There could be road accidents, for example. No, they wouldn't be there. Only if something is political. Related to political things, they would be there. Any other crime that takes place, they would not be there. I have seen, for example, in a park that two young people are hitting each other with clubs, and I have even called the police force and say, come, there are two people fighting with each other, and they say it's none of our business. We lost the witness. No, she's there. That's to say, they just would pass. One of them would pass the issue to the other. Only when the issue is political, then the officers intervened. Otherwise, no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Witness. Just one question. On the third day of the protests, you indicated that you were outside and that the protesters were mainly women. Is that right?
بله
Yes.
I'm just looking, because you seem to have observed quite carefully what was happening. Was the response of the authorities to the women protesters different in any way from their response to men protesters?
نه
No, for them it wouldn't make any difference, man or woman, it wouldn't make any difference. If you are against the government, whether you are a man or a woman or a child, even if you are a child of 7 or 8 years, no, they would have no mercy on you. It doesn't make any difference for them, man or woman.
What were the kind of responses that were given in relation to the female protesters?
Only by bullets. Either they would beat you up with the truncheons, or they would shoot you with bullets, either war bullets or pellet bullets. They would have no mercy even on a pregnant woman. We lost her, I think. If they don't have any mercy on a pregnant woman who is coming out of a pharmacy and they shoot her, it wouldn't make any difference for them.
Good morning, Madam Witness. I had just two questions. You mentioned at the very start of your testimony that you submitted a film of the banks burning. Was that to the tribunal?
نه
No, unfortunately, I had sent it somewhere else. But when I submitted my statement to the tribunal, I was not in the possession of the film anymore, because because of certain problems, I knew that my mobile phone and the mobile phones of my family members were always controlled. Therefore, I cannot talk about it here.
You also mentioned that there was the use of water cannons in the protest. Were you personally impacted by that? Did you get wet?
بله.
Yes, we were retreating because of it, but then we repeated our slogans. It was not that important for us. We have seen worse than that, and even if worse than that happens to us, still we still want to reach our goal in order to eradicate the Islamic Republic.
Do you remember if the water was hot or cold?
سرد بود.
Cold.
I think that's all the questions from the panel. Council.
Thank you, Ms. Witness.
Madam Witness, thank you very much for testifying. We've have your statement and we've heard everything you've said and we'll take it into account. And we appreciate the effort you've made to help us. Thank you.
خواهش می‌کنم.
You're welcome.